everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Deconstructing the Narrative. I'm your host, and I am also a content creator with SADA Collective. My name is Erica Sehat, and today I'm joined by Elizabeth. How are you, Elizabeth?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me today, Erica.
Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you being here. Awesome. On such a big day. Thank you so much.
It is a big day. I'm excited to do something fun today. You got to, silver linings every day.
Definitely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, first of all, I guess let's just kind of get started by talking about what it is that you do. So can you kind of just give us all a rundown on what your role in the creative industry is at the moment?
Sure. So I started out in Los Angeles working in production. I was on a documentary series that came out on Netflix back in last December. Now it's been a year, but I love documentary. I studied journalism, and so I've been writing my whole life. And right now I'm more of a freelance writer and kind of like digital content creator on the side. Mm-hmm. And I love just making content, no matter what that is. Most of it is writing right now, but I interview people. So it's funny to be on the other side of an interview for once, but I'm enjoying it. It's always a conversation, no matter if it's, something I write down, I capture on film, or, do over a Zoom call.
That's awesome. Wait, I want to get a little bit deeper into this Netflix series. So can you kind of give us a rundown on like what that process was and which series was it and kind of how that all worked out for you, I guess, as a creative?
Yeah, sure. So I was working at Dr. Phil, actually, when I first moved out here.
That's crazy.
It was crazy. It was a crazy time. It really was, awesome. Right out of college, like, let's do it. Daytime talk show. Let's go. And I was really passionate about, I'm passionate about a lot of things, but the food industry being one of them. And so I reached out to this company that did Food Inc. It's called Robert Kenner Films. And they're working on a docuseries, nothing to do with food, but very important nonetheless. It's called The Confession Killer. And it came out last December. 5 episodes, was going to be 5 episodes. And it was all about this guy who was in Texas and basically confessed to all these murders he didn't commit. So a lot of, So it was actually about 200 plus of these that he was actually, on the books for. And it was a lot about corruption in law enforcement. So something that this year has really, shed some extra light on, but this is back in the 80s in Texas. So this series was really interesting. I was just on the production team, not a huge role, production assistant, associate. But I got to be involved in lots of different aspects of the project, which was really fun for me. It was a 2-year project. And by the end of it, we created a product that I really believed in. And I feel like really told a compelling story about something that happened in the 80s, but the repercussions are still today very relevant. I mean, there's a victim families that number in the hundreds for all these people that were affected by Henry Lee Lucas. So great show to watch. I guess that will be my pitch for it. If you want to check it out, it's on Netflix.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. Wow. And so did that, just working in that kind of industry, kind of inspire you to kind of go off? And I guess, how did your your background in journalism kind of tie into that? And what was the process of everything just kind of coming together for you to where you are now?
Right. So I was always interested in people's stories, and I found that, the visual medium was such a cool way to show that. And so I got really into documentary film, and that is kind of what led me to Robert Kenner Films. And, they were working for Netflix, but we were separate from Netflix, but, working on a project that I knew was going to be meaningful and was going to be seen by a lot of people. And as a journalist, we're always trying to find that story. And for me, it's usually human interest. I love I love conversations. And so as a journalist, I do a lot of interviewing now. I, interview for companies. I interview for my own articles I write for people. And I also actually help people write books, whether it's a business professional writing a book or me writing a memoir for someone based on interviewing them through a company called Story Terrace. So that's been something I've been doing this past year, is, getting to interact with people over the phone and actually write their life story. So kind of more history, but through the mouth of the person that lived it, which has been really, really fulfilling for me. And one of the projects I've been lucky enough to work on during this kind of hectic time that we're in.
That's awesome. Wow. And I kind of want to, talk a little bit about, because you have this really deep history with writing and stuff. We haven't really had any writers at all on the series. So I really kind of want to dive in and kind of have you explain the process behind that in terms of like creatively, you know what I mean? What is the creative process like for writing journalism or writing stories like that? Because I know it's obviously very different than if you were working on like photography or something else. So I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into that, because I feel like we often don't really regard, for some reason, writing as a creative outlook. And I really feel like writing is one of the most creative things you can possibly do. So that's why I really wanted you to be on the series, was to kind of give everybody kind of a background on your process when it comes to writing, and how that kind of impacts you as a creative.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate the, questions. It's so important to ask those intentional, deep questions. And I think as a writer, it starts from there. So in terms of like journalistic writing, article writing, writing these books, for story terrace, these memoirs, it does all start from that inception point of like the conversation. And that's kind of my driving point as an artist, is like, what is this person trying to say, and how can I help them say it in a way that, the way they want it to come across? Because sometimes people might say something and they're like, well, that's not exactly what I meant, or maybe I could articulate myself better. And I really feel like that's one of my gifts, is that, being able to take words, to take ideas and meanings and create something that's eloquent, that's compelling, engaging, even concise. And it's interesting because writing is something we're taught, growing up. Some people have more of a knack, a propensity for it, which I definitely did growing up. I was always writing scripts and songs. And this, once I got into journalism in high school and writing for the magazine at our high school, I really started falling in love with interviewing and getting to just connect with people. I was like, wow, I could get like paid to just talk to people and then write it down, and it's like interesting and unique, compelling. And it's just this piece that you always have. You can send to someone and it says what you want it to say, and it tells you that story with that arc. And so for me, the process, because a lot of my writing does, it's so intrinsically tied to the interview, that is very important to me. So I usually do, a phone call or a Zoom. I am a very fast typer. For some reason, when I was in elementary or middle school, I just really went at it in those typing classes. So I can pretty much type as fast as people can talk. So I just pretty much transcribe everything that is in a conversation, whether or not I think it's needed, because sometimes you go back and you look at a transcript or something that you've created and you're like, wow, this random section I didn't think was going to be useful for the article ends up being a super compelling twist. So I think, making people feel comfortable, making people feel that, the space is there to be vulnerable, to open up about their experiences, and they have someone there that wants to listen. It's going to ask them that follow-up question that's intentional. It's not like, the bulleted questions. Like, of course, I do my research. I think that's important to come in, knowing about the person you're going to talk to. But above and beyond that, it's that follow-up question. It's, how's the emotion in the room? What made them kind of spark that you want to follow up on? And so really getting that great conversation as a starting point and then taking that beyond. So, I have really enjoyed getting into different kind of facets of the writing game. I've written some scripts this year, which has been really fun. I actually did this like digital series with my sister. We like created and hosted like a blind dating show for Greek Americans, because I have a Greek background. And I was kind of writing the scripts that we were saying, and we were like commenting on the different couples. And spoiler alert, there actually was some success. So I am also a matchmaker.
Awesome.
If anybody needs to be match made. That's on like YouTube and Instagram as well. So really just like, again, it's all about connecting with people for me. And for me, my gift is writing. And so I connect with people and I use what I, learn from them, and I write with it usually. So, so that's kind of where it all starts for me. And in terms of process, I don't really have anything specific. I guess it's just kind of taking those parts that I find to be most compelling and creating a story around that and a structure, moving things around that make more sense, cohesively. But really, again, the conversation is where it all starts.
Definitely. And you were kind of talking about, this process of, you do a lot of writing for other people. So how have you found that you've been able to kind of show your voice, even though you're telling someone else's story? Like, in what ways have you been able to kind of, let your Elizabeth's voice come through, even though it's like a telling of someone else, even though you're kind of talking about someone else? What are some, I guess, tips you've kind of come across and so that you are able to do that?
That is such a great question, because I do think you can really lose yourself if you know, are always working on someone else's project, someone else's dream. And I think, you know, that's something in the creative world we probably all struggle with. You know, how do we pay the bills? How do we also do what we love and, you know, find fulfillment and meaning in that? Where's that cross stitch? And so for me, like this is kind of not really like, this is kind of like skirting the question. I've gotten to do a few personal pieces this year that have really given me a lot of, you know, it's been huge for me to do these pieces because they really were well received. They really were, you know, they were spread among my community and people outside my community, and it actually brought people to me in a way of like, I'm so big on like representation and like being able to use your trade to like make other people feel heard and all those voices be heard. And so for me, I guess in terms of your first question, I seek out kind of stories and articles that I find compelling and I want to talk about and write about, and I can find my experience in theirs. So that is, you know, looking for magazines that are actually like queer focused, because I'm queer. And so it's like, getting to tell those stories makes me feel like, wow, I'm getting to help these people feel seen, and the people reading this article can maybe find themselves in it. Like I find myself in it too. And so by like people that have a similar story to me in some way, me telling it makes me go, oh, wow, like this resonates with me and I'm able to kind of creatively express myself. I was writing for this Greek newspaper for about a year when I first moved out here. And that was cool because we both had that Greek cultural background when I interviewed people. So I had that in common. And then getting this year to write some personal pieces, like the one I mentioned, it was basically like called My Big Fat Greek Coming Out Story. And it was published in this magazine earlier in the year. And then I published it on my own, just on my Instagram and Facebook, on LinkedIn. And it actually just kind of blew up. My whole community, like kind of, I don't want to say freaked out, but they were like in a good way. Like they were like, whoa, we didn't know this. And like, you know, again, this is my gift. And so I was able to say exactly what I wanted to say in the most intentional, specific way that I did not waste one word, I will say. So like, I recently read that piece at this like queer open mic virtual thing. And I was like, oh, was it too long? And my friend was like, no, every single word was like there for a reason. And that's how I kind of try to write. I don't want to waste time. I don't want to waste people's time. We're in such a world that has a million different distractions, content. We're inundated with stuff all the time. And so I don't want to add to that noise unless it's intentionally. So I really try, you know, through my writing to be concise, intentional, and purposeful. So that piece for me specifically was like probably one of my most influential of the year, just because it had a big influence on my life, the people in my community, and even people outside of my community that reached out to me that were like, I'm Greek in the closet, part of the Greek Orthodox Church. Like, what do I do? You know, I don't know if my family is going to be accepting of me, you know? And I was like, wow, that's not like, oh, I wanted this, but that's 100% something I wanted, was for people to find their story in mine and be able to relate in a way that maybe there aren't many other Greek American queer women that are writing these things. I don't know. I haven't seen a ton of them, but they're out there, I'm sure. But anyways, that was a really big piece for me of the year.
Yeah. So you're saying kind of just finding like that balance between being able to work on other people's stories and also kind of finding time to work on your own as well. Yeah, I think that's really important. And the reason I wanted to touch on that is because I do feel like, kind of like you mentioned in the beginning, that, you know, especially with artists, we oftentimes get given projects that we may not fully believe in. And yeah, like you said, just pay the bills. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the times that's what happens. And oftentimes that takes away from, you know, us being able to focus on the things that we do care about when it comes to our work. And I think that's it's really hard to find that balance. And I really like what you said about the fact that you seek out projects that you believe in, so that even if you're working on somebody else's story, it's still something that you connect with, you know? And I really think that that's really important for artists to kind of keep into consideration when I'm picking up projects and stuff, that like, of course we have to, you know, all make a living, but at the same time, it's, you know, just seek out things that kind of interest you. So that way, even if it's not necessarily exactly what you want to be doing, it's still something that you connect with. So you can kind of, you know, put your work into that. So I definitely think that's really important. Awesome. And kind of moving over, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about what you find like a creative's role in today's society to be, because like, you know, obviously, you know, especially with everything that's going on today, just socially, what have you kind of discovered, especially through writing, that has, you know, that a creative really like what their role is, I guess, in this society, and what we're kind of responsible for in this creative culture at the moment?
I mean, I think end of the day, the biggest responsibility is like being authentic to yourself and to like who you are, because you know, if you're expressing something that's inauthentic to you or your beliefs, like it's just going to come across that way. And it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to be the best work that you can put out there. If you stay true to what you believe in when you're writing, you shouldn't really have to think twice about it. And to me, you know, I would say, you know, having that strong ethical character and knowing your influence, like if you're writing for a magazine and they do have a wide breadth of like readership, you know, you have to know that what you're writing actually can have an impact. So you want to make sure you're fact checking. You want to make sure the quotes are what they, you know, what they are. You're not mincing people's words or messing something up, or, you know, alluding to something that's actually not true. I mean, there is a responsibility that when you're putting something out there, you know, it's going to reflect you. End of the day, if you want to be known for work that's like not truthful, not ethical, you know, that's mudslinging against like one side or the other, and it's not rooted in facts and truth and honesty and intentionality, that's going to be on you end of the day. And it's hard because we live in a world where there is cancel culture, but there also is so much content going on, and we're not all influencers. And so in your own sphere of influence, you know, maybe you won't have to take responsibility for those actions, but at the end of the day, it's going to come up, it's going to catch you someday. I believe, you know, if you are not living an authentic life and being authentic to yourself in the work you're putting out there as a creative, it's going to reflect on you at some point. It's not going to be a good ending for you, because I believe art should be authentic. That's kind of the point of it, I think, is like we each have our own story we're telling, and you have a responsibility to that story. My story is different than your story. Even my sister and I, like, we have such a similar upbringing, so many interests that are the same, but we have our own stories. And so you need to tell that story. And that's what I think, if you can just hold true to that simple, maybe seemingly simple concept, you're going to do well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what the point of the series is, you know, is really being able to uncover those stories. Because like we also believe, you know, especially as creatives, that like that is what makes you unique and that is what makes you stand out. And a lot of people feel like, you know, my work isn't as good as this person's work or vice versa. And it's like, okay, that's not really what matters. What matters is that you're telling, you know, your narrative. And like you said, you know, there's only one of those. There's only one of your narrative. And I think it's really important as well to kind of have that authentic aspect in any creative work, just because that's what's going to kind of set you apart from everybody else. And so, yeah, I really like that you mentioned that, because that's definitely really like kind of what we're trying to gear towards with the series. And it's definitely just really important that all artists kind of focus on telling their story, because everyone's unique and everyone's different, and there's never two. So it's definitely really important.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Definitely.
So I want to dial a little bit back into like your childhood and upbringing. I know you mentioned you kind of come from, you know, Greek, and it seems, you know, Greek culture, and it seems like that's kind of a really big part of what you kind of focus on right now. So can you kind of let us in a little bit on that? And also just what, I guess, in your upbringing that kind of led you towards writing, and why you kind of discovered that passion?
Yeah. So I, you know, grew up with 5 younger siblings, big fat Greek family, you know, grew up going to the Greek Orthodox church, dancing in our Greek festivals, really like, you know, warm, supportive community, huge extended family on both sides. So really grew up feeling a lot of love. And I write about it in that piece I mentioned. I never doubted that they would ever love, or that they would ever stop loving or supporting me no matter what I wanted to do. And so having that support really makes you feel like you can take on the world, because you've got the world behind you, you know, pushing you there. And so I really am grateful, and I don't take it for granted that I had that kind of upbringing. And I feel, you know, a lot of thankfulness for that. On the other hand, of course, you know, growing up in that environment made it difficult to become like who I actually am, which is like a queer woman, among all the other things, like writer and Christian and everything. You know, it's not, it's intersectional. I'm an intersectional person, as we all are. And like, I try to be authentic to that truth. So that's, again, on the authentic note of, you know, expressing that side of my art. And so growing up, finding writing, I just always loved to write. I just found it as a kid, and I just immediately, I was a reader, voraciously reading ever since I was a little kid, you know, at the table, in the car, all the time. And I had a yaya, my grandmother, yaya in Greek, and she really encouraged that in me. She was an English teacher before she had kids, and she encouraged me, you know, to like write speeches, to like give in our Greek oratorical festival, and she would edit my papers for me, and just really encouraged me in that. And everybody in my family did, but she is definitely the most English person in the family, and she passed away. So I always kind of think about like what she would think of what I'm doing now, like the kind of conversations we would have. because I have a very large family and I'm very lucky. Like she's the only one that's gone. So it's kind of one of those things like, dang it, you know, I became an adult, I found myself, and I lost somebody that was like so important in my life and my come up. But writing was always so important to me. I think you really gravitate towards the things that you love and the things that you're good at. And so one of my mentors once told me, you know, like, do what you love and the money will follow. And that's kind of what I try to live by, is that I'm still pushing towards that, where it's like, yeah, I could be working some like maybe business marketing type job for a big company and doing that kind of life. And that's not a bad life at all. You know, I tell my sister all the time, we're like, people go home and just watch Netflix and that's all they do. And that's fine for them. But we always are driven to like be creating. And it just like can be almost like not suffocating, but it just takes up your life. Like when you said, how do you make time for other projects? You just do them. And that's your free time, is doing other projects. And in terms of the Greek thing as well, like my sister and I, we started that show over the quarantine. We kind of were all together. I was back in Columbus with my 5 siblings, my parents. We were all in the house, you know, quarantining together. And my sister and I were like, let's make a Greek dating show, kind of like Love is Blind, but we'll make it Love is Quarantine Greek style. So we did that. And that was such a fun project to work on, blending the Greek background, blending the digital media and like my family. So I'm not sure if I departed from the question. I probably did, but that was my, I guess, childhood.
Not at all. No, it all connects. And I love what you said about like, do what you love and the money will come. I grew up hearing that from my mom, like my whole life, you know, and I think I preach it to everybody in my life, because I feel like you said, you know, you could go work any job that's going to make you the money. And like, but it's like, that's like what that's your life, you know, you're doing it every single day. And I feel like it's so important to like, if you're just doing what you love, like, you know, eventually everything else just does fall into place. You know what I mean? It's just so important to kind of invest your time in those areas. So I love that you mentioned that and that you kind of live by that as well, because I think that's so important. So yeah, it's definitely a really big point. And I think that, you know, especially as artists, we kind of need to keep that in mind, because oftentimes, especially in this industry, you'll hear, you know, like starving artist, or, you know, you're going to not be successful. And there's all this doubt in your head when you enter this industry. So to kind of just keep in mind, like what you're doing and that you love it and kind of where you started, I think is so important. So I really love that you kind of brought that up. And it's so cool to hear kind of how throughout your childhood, you've kind of just incorporated that into everything that you've been doing and just kind of been focusing on. And obviously, you know, it's worked out in your favor. So there's exhibit A. Yeah, it's definitely really great. And do you have like a specific story of like a specific instance, like whether that be in your childhood or recently, that was really inspirational for you that you kind of took and wrote about, I guess, in any sort of form?
Well, I will say, so I thought of this question and immediately the documentary, This Changes Everything came to mind. Gina Davis was behind it. And it's all about like, you know, female representation, like gender in the media, and like female directors kind of specifically. And I was lucky enough to be at a showing for that, a screening with the like LA Press Club, and Gina Davis was there, and some of the women, like the director, Catherine Hardwicke, the director of Twilight series, was there. Another female director was there, and they were all in this panel, and it was just so inspirational. And it was so, you know, important to have that representation and to see it on the screen, like what an incredible, you know, like influence that is to have that and to give that to people watching shows or reading articles, consuming media or content, whatever that looks like, is to have yourself represented on the screen. And so that meant a lot to me. And it's always kind of influenced me, but that documentary specifically, just being in the audience and watching these women in person speak on their experiences. And I'm like, wow, like, you know, they're trailblazers. She is a trailblazer, a change maker. And I want to be that way. And especially like, you know, after releasing that article earlier this year, I was really just compelled to continue doing that, continue advocating, continue finding content. Like, you know, I reach out to, or I guess I just enjoy jobs that are in the queer space. I like host queer events, and I lead my own like queer Bible study through an affirming church in Pasadena. And so really trying to like connect with that community, because I do think that you are most powerful and influential in the communities of which you represent. So if you're trying to like reach out to all these people that honestly don't have that much in common with you, you're just trying to like make content that they're going to like, why should they like it? Like, where do they relate? The reason our show Dating Greek went so well is because the whole Greek community was like, that's me. Like, that's my life. I see myself on there. I remember reading, I don't remember who it was, but there was an actress that was saying that when she saw the Joy Luck Club, it was the first time she cried because it was the first time that her and her mom were seen on screen, like somebody that could represent her and her mom on screen. And I was blown away. I'm like, I've never had to deal with that as a like white woman. And, you know, but in the queer space, I don't always see love stories that represent me. And so it's just like finding that kind of, again, that like cross stitch where it's like, where do you make the most, you know, influence, power, the biggest kind of splash. So people really respond to you. Like that to me is kind of what I'm still going for. I don't have it figured out by any means, but that's kind of the path that I keep kind of trying to pursue.
Definitely. Yeah. That's really cool to kind of hear that, you know, the background, and yeah, it's definitely really awesome. And I guess kind of moving over from that, this is kind of stemming off of that question, I guess. What is like, I guess, just based off of inspiration and everything that we were just talking about, is like a dream project that you would like to work on, whether that be in that area that inspired you or just in general, like what is something that, you know, throughout your career, you're really working towards that you really want to achieve by the time you're done?
Yeah, that's such a hard question. I think it's because I enjoy so many different types of projects, but I feel like if I could be working on my own show, that, I mean, I feel like everybody wants their own show. Everybody wants their own platform. But I do think that, you know, getting to work with someone like a Gina Davis, someone that's a change maker that really is trying to create these spaces, these intentional, you know, inclusive spaces where you're bridging the gap between different communities that aren't usually together, whether it's, you know, the Christian and the queer community or something else. I think that is where you can be most powerful, like I said. And so being able to kind of like host, you know, produce a show like that, where we're kind of bringing to the forefront that intentional conversation with people that, you know, maybe don't always have that voice. I think that would be a dream for me because I love being creative. I love kind of the creative development, but I'm not always the best at the nuts and the bolts. So having kind of a show that I could kind of like help creatively spearhead, but have the team behind me to help with those other elements. Like production is not my strong suit, or like I do editing, but I'm not like a world-class editor. And so I really think a collaborative team working on a project like a show would be a really cool thing for me, because I always think I always will be writing. There's no doubt in my mind about that, but I don't necessarily aspire to like write a book necessarily. I think the kind of content I write is more specific, article driven, like, you know, help somebody write a book, but maybe not like come up with all the creative content on my own. It's like a different beast, you know, when you're using interviews to write a book versus writing a book from your own knowledge. It is a lot different. So definitely. I think that would be a dream for me if I could do that at some point in my career. And yeah, that would be really fun.
Yeah, I think that'd be really amazing. It'd be kind of just incorporating everything that you love into one thing, which would be really cool to see. Exactly. That's awesome. Cool. And what is something that that you know now that you wish you would have known then? And by that, I mean, like, what is something that throughout your time being a creative that like you would lend as advice to your younger self when you were just starting to kind of pick up writing, and, you know, the whole industry was just kind of like a big, like, scary place to enter, you know? What is something that you would lend as advice to that younger version of yourself?
I'm sorry, my eyes tearing. So this is a great question as well. I think it's kind of the note that we had already both said, that like we lead our lives by, you know, like do what you love and the money will follow. Like pursue your path, go after your passion, not the thing that you think is the coolest, the thing that you think will give you the most clout, the most money, the best platform. Do what you're actually good at and what you find like fulfillment in, and don't worry about, you know, what the specific prescribed path that people are telling you to go on and what that looks like for you. It's going to be different. It's going to be unique. If you're a creative, if you're an artist, like the world is your oyster and you need to go after everything you can. Like I always go after opportunities. I've done some really crazy, wild things and people are like, how do you get these things? Where do you find them? I'm like, I'm just always, my ears are always open. I'm always looking for things. I'm always trying to keep challenging myself. Another thing I really like to say or remind myself of is, there's no growth in the comfort zone. There's no comfort in the growth zone. And so that's something I also try to live by, in that like, if I'm really comfortable, I'm probably not growing a lot. And when I am growing, I'm probably uncomfortable. And so like, keep up with that and keep making yourself uncomfortable, keep learning, and just don't let yourself get stressed out by what the world is telling you. Like, this is a path you need to go. This is a path this is what you should be doing right now in your career, because just trust those instincts and keep doing the thing that you're good at and the thing that most people respond to, because it is your authentic story. It's who you really are. So on that as well, accept yourself sooner. Do it. Everything will be better. You will be able to tell a story in a much more authentic way, much more, a way that resonates with people better. So the earlier you do that, the better for you, the better for your creative work. Again, I don't think you can be a great creative artist if you're telling inauthentic stories. So that was what I would tell myself.
Yeah, especially, because I feel like eventually you'll run out of, content if you're kind of always going off of something else that's not you, and it's like, just like your life is constantly changing. And I feel like as an artist, if you are speaking on that story, every day is a new day. Every day is a new encounter and a new experience. And like, just being able to kind of channel that into your work just kind of gives you a constant flow of content to kind of be putting out. And again, it's also really just, it looks very authentic and it looks very, individualized from any other artist because it is yours. So yeah, I think that's really great. And I really love that you really touched on that, specifically throughout this whole interview. I think that's really important. And I really think it's awesome that you're kind of focusing on that. And it's been so fun to hear about, this journalism and writing area of the creative industry, because we haven't really gotten to speak with anybody, like I said, much about it. So I think it's really, like I said, important to kind of touch on those kinds of creatives as well. So thank you so much. It's been so awesome speaking with you. And lastly, just for fun, we've been asking everybody what their favorite song is at the moment.
Ooh, okay, that's a good one. I think, I'm trying to make sure this is the right name. I'm pretty sure it's Brazil by Declan McKenna.
Oh, I love that song. Yeah.
Sure.
I know what you're talking about.
Isn't it great? Oh, I love that song too. So good. Oh, so good. Okay, I'm glad that you know it. It's been so great chatting with you, Erica. Thank you so much for all your intentional questions and just like your, attention and just doing this project. I think it means a lot to artists to just have their voices heard. I mean, I think it's a lot of what the final product is and not the process to get to the final product, the stuff that's like hard and annoying and that you have to like, just revise. But then you get to the end and you're like, oh, this is what everyone cares about. But it's like the process that's obviously like what gets you to the final product. So thank you for doing this series. I can't wait to see how it turns out, and just really appreciate that you're doing this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Yeah. And I think that's really, like you said, it is really important to kind of talk about those middle parts, because oftentimes, especially with social media, we'll see a final image or a final, this is what I did, you know what I mean? But again, like, how are we supposed to understand, the narrative behind that? And I think, again, that's so important. And just going back to, this really like touching into these authentic stories, you're not able to do that if you just kind of see a final product. So I definitely think it's really important. So I'm really glad that you were here today, and thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any friends, or if anybody watching has any creative friends who would like to be interviewed for this series, you can send them my way via Typeform. I'll put the link down below where they can apply, or you can also email me directly at erica@sadacollective.com. Also, a couple other announcements. We have our Conversation Fit series going on. I don't know if you know about this one, Elizabeth. It's called Conversation Fit, and basically every Wednesday at 5 p.m. We're kind of moving over to more niche sessions. So basically we're having like a group of creatives, whether that be, let's say 1 week we focus on journalists, journalism people. They'll kind of all come in. You guys would be able to like read some of the work you're working on, kind of chat with each other and get some feedback, and kind of share resources that you guys have all found within this, within your guys' niche, and collaboration opportunities and stuff. So it's kind of more connecting you guys with each other, which is really fun. So that's going on every Wednesday. And then now starting every Friday, I haven't given it a name yet, but we're going to start taking on Event House, because as we're launching our creatives only digital community, which is coming out really soon, we were basically going to have every Friday picking someone from the community to kind of throw their own event and let them kind of teach the community about something, whatever they choose. So that's fun. So we kind of got all different areas of kind of connecting people with each other. So I'm really excited about that. So definitely look down below. I have an application for the event host as well. And I also have a link for where you can register for Conversation Fit every week. And other than that, thank you everybody for watching and tuning in. And I really hope you enjoyed listening to Elizabeth as much as I enjoyed talking to her. And thank you again, Elizabeth. And I look forward to the next episode. I'll see you guys all soon.